Right. So yes, now it's working. So yeah, again, a very warm welcome from my side to this official opening ceremony of the October 2024 at GIZ. Before we start with our exciting inputs, let's just have a quick look at the agenda. At first, we will start the official opening ceremony with some opening remarks by Heike Litzinger, head of the Division for Energy, Urban Development, Mobility and Infrastructure at the Federal German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ for short. She will highlight the relevance and importance of inclusion in sustainable urban development and BMZ's commitment to it. So she will shed some light on the important roles that inclusivity and fighting inequalities in the urban environments play. She will be followed by our keynote speaker, Anna Heringer, a German architect who will give us some insights in how to practically implement inclusion aspects in architecture. And she will do so by presenting one of her most inspiring projects, the Anandaloy building in Bangladesh, which hosts a center for people with disabilities combined with a little studio for producing fair textiles. And last but not least, Martina Liebermann, the head of the sector program Cities, will connect the impressions gained with the work of GIZ in sustainable urban development and also give a brief outlook on the events and topics covered during GIZ October 2024. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand over the virtual microphone to Dr. Heike Litzinger for her opening remarks. Yes, Ms. Litzinger, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Julian Ratgeber, and warm welcome from my side as well on behalf of the BMZ to all GIZ colleagues here in Germany and abroad, to all our colleagues from commissioning ministries, to our dear partners and to the audience. I'm very happy to and glad, thank you for allowing me to do so, to officially welcome you to this year's Urban October at GIZ. We want to put this year a spotlight on a crucial issue for everybody who is dealing with the field of integrated urban planning, which is tackling inequalities in our cities and promoting a just transition to ensure that no one is left behind. And we especially have to look here at people with disabilities and the inequalities they are facing in our cities. It is really crucial to address the unique challenges faced by persons with disabilities. And when we look at the numbers, it's about 1.3 billion people worldwide. That is about 16% of the world's population who are affected by some form of disability, which makes it and then it's it's 4 out of 5 people with disabilities who live in developing and emerging countries. So at the same time, there are estimations that by 2050, almost 3 billion people will reside in informal areas, which is really a shocking number. Among those happening to live in informal areas, people with disabilities suffer most from the poor standards of living and everyday barriers in those areas. Living in informal settlements challenges their mobility, health, safety, and security. But cities should be designed to be accessible and inclusive for all, so that everybody who is able to has an opportunity to live an independent life. An inclusive city is one that removes physical, social, and economic barriers. To include urban citizens with disabilities is not just a moral imperative, but also a key component of sustainable urban development. Cities that are designed for all are more resilient, equitable, and better prepared for the future. Accessibility benefits everyone sooner or later. If we, as we are right now participating in the Urban October, will have the privilege to get old, we'll all be happy to have cities with less stairs and more benches and less barriers. So ensuring that people with disabilities are included in urban planning and decision-making is also essential for a just transition. We have to include different perspectives to identify barriers and develop solutions that benefit the broader community. We must also recognize that climate change disproportionately affects persons with disabilities, particularly those in informal settlements who often have less access to resources for adaptation. So, summarizing, by addressing the intersection of urban inequalities, informal settlements, and disability inclusion, we actually can create cities that are not only more just, but also more livable and vibrant. We as BMZ are committed to strengthen the role of cities when it comes to the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Let me give you 3 examples from our work. So, first example is a GIZ project with the name or the title Sustainable Urban Mobility, addressing as well air quality, climate action, and accessibility in India. With this project, we are funding a joint Indo-German search for possibilities to make urban transport more environmentally friendly and accessible for people with disabilities. A second example from East Africa, with the KfW project Climate and Gender Responsive Design of Public Spaces in Rwandan Cities, we support the national Rwandan government in creating and rehabilitating green spaces and urban forests. Here we have a special focus on gender responsive planning, and we ensure that parks are inclusive and accessible for all, including people with disabilities as well as families with strollers. The third example is the C40 Cities Finance Facility, which is a multi-donor initiative co-funded by BMZ, UK, France, and others that supports cities in finding public and private financing solutions for infrastructure projects. Within the Cities Finance Facility, we focus on projects that address marginalized groups, such as people with disabilities. Altogether, we in the BMZ want to strengthen our commitment in this regard. Together with the government of Jordan and the International Disability Alliance, BMZ will host the Global Disability Summit in April next year. Just this morning, we had a meeting with our general director, and we had a presentation of the colleague who is in charge of preparing the Global Disability Summit, who was giving us an idea of the state of preparations, and who was encouraging us to strengthen kind of the mainstreaming of a regard for people with disabilities and the removal of barriers, especially integrated urban planning is a field where this can be like shown in many impressive examples. And I was very happy to this morning in this meeting to then tell everybody in the room, we start Urban October right now, today, and we will have a special focus, a special spotlight on the question how we can better address inclusiveness in our integrated urban planning. So now, Mrs. Heringer, I'm really curious and looking forward to your input right now, because you will give us an impressive example of what you are working on in Bangladesh. And I think all of us are looking forward to this month and the inspiring discussions we are going to have and hoping to have. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, to me, architecture is a tool to improve lives, and that, of course, includes people with special needs and people with disabilities. And just to give you a bit of a background, I was lucky to be a development learner in Bangladesh. At the age of 19, I went to Bangladesh to learn from a local NGO called Deepshika, which, by the way, is also a partner of BMZ. And what I learned there was that the most effective strategy is always to look at the resources you have in your direct surrounding, within yourself, in your network, and make the best out of those resources without getting depending on any external factors. And I had always had this passion for development work, and at the same time for aesthetics, for architecture and designing. And somehow when that was 1997, and when I looked at all the examples of NGOs building in the global south, it always looked like what you see on, in the model. Master plan, completely effective, efficient, straight grid and functional, based on function. and somehow not really integrating the beauty of the vernacular structures. And that made me quite sad. And I felt, you know, as an architect, I cannot be useful in that field because I couldn't bring those two things together. And then, of course, all institutes that were coming with some money and education and power usually neglected also the local materials and started building with concrete. And of course, this has effect on the surrounding. You know, here you wouldn't know on which continent you were. A lot of diversity was lost. So I finally found my missing link between the development work and the architecture and the design and the beauty, and that was the mud. So I designed a school with clay, with the materials that were directly under my feet. So I transmitted the knowledge that I got from the NGO into the architecture, trying to use the resources that I had at hand, the mud, the bamboo all around, and as energy source people. And by the way, with all the projects that we did there, we had also people with disabilities included in the process, in the building process even. So when we talk about energy sources these days, we usually think of gas, oil, sun, wind, but we forget that each and every one of us is a source of energy too, and we are a growing source of energy. And this energy source also wants to be needed, wants to be used, otherwise we also create a social problem. So this is the first school that I built in the village called Rutapur in Bangladesh. I realized together with Heike Litzinger, it was my diploma project. So load-bearing earth wall without any cement added, and then a bamboo story on top. We kept the floor really neutral, and through these caves you come to the back wall, you come into the cave areas. We were just trying to remember the spaces that I liked when I was a kid and that are kind of universal. And then the tree house on top. Children all signed with the names, and they rightfully did so because they helped building. And that for me is a wonderful image because it shows how inclusive earth and mud can be. You cannot build in a participatory approach with any material. You know, if it's a toxic material, if it's a material that needs sophisticated tools that could harm you, then it's dangerous to do so. But we could really include, we had children, of course they had classes in the morning, but in the afternoon they usually have creative classes such as pottery and clay work. So they had clay works in a rather different scale, in the scale of a building. And we also had elderly people involved who usually would not get a job at this age anymore and would, you know, be out of work. But especially when you're getting old, you really, really need work because you have no savings in that context, in the rural context of northern Bangladesh. And of course, we had men and women, and we also had people with disabilities working with us. And that's the nice thing with clay. So far, I found work for anybody on a site. And that inclusive nature of this material is what really makes me love it even more, besides all the ecological effects. And I think you can imagine when you stand in front of your building as a small girl or as a small boy, knowing that I built this thing with using nothing than my muscles and the dirt underneath my feet, that just gives an enormous boost of confidence in your own potentials, in the team, in the community, and of course also in the local resources, which are usually seen as poor materials, especially clay. But clay for me is really the champion of sustainable building materials. The only material you can take from the ground, recycle as often as you want without any loss of quality, just by adding water. No other material can do that. And if you don't need the building anymore, you just return it to the ground it came from and plant a garden on top. So I built several buildings in that village, and that was the last one I built, Anandaloy, a center for people with disabilities. And if you compare this floor plan with the first buildings that I built, which are very rectangular boxes, kind of straight walls, everything is kind of following a certain pattern, how we usually build our houses in a rectangular way. With this one, I wanted to show it's beautiful that we have people that break out of the mold, that are different, and that this diversity is something that to celebrate, and this just adds beauty and joy to our society and to our lives. So this building literally dances in curves, and in Germany we would say it aus der Reihe tanzen, so dancing out of the raw. And when you approach that building, the first thing you see is a ramp that kind of winds up all around the building. And already during the construction, there were so many people coming, everyone was asking, why do you need a ramp? And then you're immediately at the core discussion, you know, why a universal access, why an inclusive access is so important. And then you're at the topic of inclusiveness quite naturally. And that is the power of architecture, that it can also make concepts and visions very easily visible. So the ramp is the most defining element of that building. In the ground floor, we have therapy rooms, and it's a very protected, cozy area within this mud walls. And here we also have caves, but they are differently shaped than the ones in Mitte School. You can directly from the ground crawl into it, and you have to move your body much more than in the other one of the Mitte School, and it's made as a therapy instrument or tool, because it helps you coordinating the muscles. And while you do this exercises, you discover a little rabbit hole universe underneath. And it is something that is really beautiful to observe. You know, normally when the doors are opening, the first thing is that the village kids are coming in, those who have no disabilities, but they know exactly that this is the place of the children with special needs. So they kind of feel like they are, you know, the intruders, and they are not on the powerful side. And then when the other kids are coming, who are usually, you know, in the weaker position, so it's like, and then they kind of meet in this very special atmosphere. It's interesting to see what's happening, and it's kind of not the normal rules exist in that space. And so the building itself becomes also part of the theory of the therapy. It's not just, you know, that you have a tool that you get up and you get down again and up and down, and you do this exercise 10 times and it's boring and it's annoying. No, you discover something in this tool, in this building. So you see the ramp, how it's winding up just in earth and bamboo. And on the top floor, we have a workspace for rural women that are also in need. So usually what we do, we with a lot of development money, we give training to tailors and to women, and usually there's not much jobs that they can get trained in the rural areas, and NGOs coming up with a brilliant idea, let's train them in tailoring. And then you have like hundreds of tailors in one village, and of course a village can only keep a certain number of tailors, and the rest is just going in the factories and working for our cheap clothes. So women have to leave their families and live in not the best humane conditions anymore. And for us, of course, the working conditions and the atmosphere is completely different here. So we produce fair fashion, and we have the therapy center on the ground floor. And I had so many nice experience with people with disabilities. For example, I had one young woman that I know since 20 years. And usually when you meet her in the village, she's very defensive. You're not allowed to smile at her because she thinks you laugh at her. And so she's very defensive. And I met her in the morning, and she was like this. No, she doesn't want to greet. She doesn't want that someone looks at her. And there was absolutely no communication possible. In the afternoon, we had a celebration at the building. She came completely dressed up. She was really the princess, and this was her castle. And I think that is something so important. There are quite a number of buildings, earth buildings on that campus, but people say this is the most beautiful, or the most special one. So for the people of disabilities, suddenly having a building that is seen from the community and that is not just functional but also beautiful, that is something that gives them so much joy and so much feeling of dignity, and that is the best thing of being able to do such a project. And it's the same thing as just giving things, you know, out of a medicine, but without any empathy and without any love. It would be like a building that is not this functional, but not really beautiful on an aesthetic level. So, and what also was helpful was that suddenly the topic of therapy was known and people were aware of it, because before they were just, disability was just seen as a you know, curse from previous life or you know, bad karma or whatever. So it was rather hidden and it was not very visible. And now suddenly, you know, with this building, the topic was in the center of all the discussions, and people understood they can have therapy, they can get therapy to make those situations easier. And then of course this was broadcasted nationwide, and so this topic is beyond that village and beyond that rural area. Of course it has also effect on a bigger scale. So for me, with this project, the main question, if we talked about social sustainability, about ecological sustainability, but when we look a bit at the economic sustainability, for me the biggest question is always who gets the profit, the cui bono. So whenever I build a building, I want to make sure that the building budget is going to people. And that was beautiful to see with this project, because I accompanied the workers when in the evening they got the building budget share, the daily wage, and then they took this money and went to the local market and invested it in the vegetables from the neighbors, for example, or got their bicycle repaired. So that means that this building did not just have a result of building, or this budget did not just have a building as a result. At the same time, it was a catalyst for local development. And that was so important, because if I had built this building in concrete or steel, this money would have been exported and lost for the community. There is so much advertisement of industrialized materials, especially of course cement, steel, aluminum, and of course then the air condition that is needed to be able to survive in these buildings. So this is a trend that is happening globally, and this is something that we cannot afford anymore. And if we see, like, for example, China consumed more cement than the United States between 2011 and 2013, China consumed more cement than the USA in the past hundreds of years. So the scale is just immense. It's not just China, but happening everywhere. So the speed of development and the scale is just immense. And we think, yeah, this was possible. Mud is not just possible for small rural projects. It was always possible, always, to use it in urban scale and also in dense urban scales. This town of Shibam in Yemen is 500 years old. So why are we not able now to build this with all the tools and technologies that we have? Of course we are able to do that. We just need to put the focus on earthen architecture and earthen structures. Again, we have to, of course, develop tools and education for those things. About 3 billion people are still living in earthen structures. 3 billion. So it's not a niche. We are not talking about a small thing, but we're talking really about a good portion of the global population that is still living in it. So of course, scaling up is possible. And if we see where does the mud come from? Every town, every place has excavations. If we just see the city of Greater Paris, it's mountains of material that is getting excavated within a couple of years, within 15 years, 500 million tons in the Ile-de-France alone. So that is lots of material. If you look, for example, in Bangladesh, the Rohingya camp in Cox's Bazar, they're sitting literally on the building material while waiting to get some tent materials from outside in. They're sitting on the building material. Some are starting building with earth, but they are not lacking of know-how. So this is our biggest trouble, that we develop tools and technologies. If we look at the state of the art in Austria, I would say it's the best so far factory of rammed earth by Martin Rauch, completely without any cement added. Walls are getting produced in a great length, cut into pieces and then mounted to multi-story buildings. You, of course, can also do hybrid structures. This is my own site in Bavaria right now for the Diocese of Munich-Freising. And this is the building I'm right now working on. So in a year, it's hopefully looking like this. So it is possible to do it also in urban spaces, of course. And then training and education is needed. So we do it in high-tech ways. So for example, a workshop with Harvard student that was at the Graduate School of Design in Harvard, where, by the way, also the first person on the site was a person in a wheelchair. So it's happening, and we can include, but also it's important that it is inclusive. In that way, we can also use it in a low-tech way, this material. It's very, very important that it's not just a technology that can be only afforded by a part of the world population, again, but is really affordable and accessible for everyone. And the material is really available everywhere in this world. So local materials, local energy, and global knowledge is something that is key to me. If we go back to the master plan of a project in Ghana, which is an educational campus, the one that is based probably on the Roman military camp. And while you see beautiful vernacular structures, And to include those kind of vernacular know-how, I visited the place. I tried to bring in all these qualities of that villages again in this campus for education for the solutions of Don Bosco. We used local techniques that again are very easy for people to copy. So this for me is also needed when we talk about inclusiveness, that we really build in a way that is inclusive and that has, allows access for anyone to use. So and here you see we did the windows in a rectangular way, and then the women came and started plastering, and then they did in the manual way, so the windows became roundish or U-shaped, so that is co-creation. That for me is the beauty of those projects, when you co-create. And of course, this is, again, a very inclusive process where we try to get the local know-how, the vernacular know-how included with specific plants. And of course, we're trying different techniques and always trying to check to make it as low access as possible for people. So ramped earth we are introducing as well. So to end up, this lecture is, for me, with the process is just as important as the outcome, is a part of our Laufen Manifesto. So when we design buildings, I really truly believe we have to design also the processes to make the processes inclusive, because architecture has an enormous social power. It can bond people together from completely different corners of the world without any understanding of each other's languages. Still, you can build together. And that is so much bonding. And I think this is a very important thing that we lost in our parts of the world. We came together in the past to build up our own houses, to help us building each other's houses, to build up a church, a temple, a mosque. And we lost this because we all delegated it to experts. But this is what I learned from building in the Global South, that there is an enormous social power in the process and in participation. And I think we should build upon of participation and this power of the social power of building together. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this very insightful and inspiring presentation. I really, really liked it. Yeah, it's a good feeling. So there's a lot of virtual applause as well. So thank you very much, Anna Heringer. I will hand over the microphone now to Martina Liebermann, who will do her closing remarks for this opening session. So yeah, Martina, the floor is yours.
Yes, first of all, hello to everybody. I'm really inspired by a wonderful presentation, dear Anna. Many thanks for that. And it was fantastic to get the insight into your work, what you have done for the Anandaloy project and the Center for People with Disabilities in Bangladesh, but also the other examples you showed at the end. It was really great to see what can be achieved. Especially when there is a clear vision and when there are passionate people like you work towards its realization. Yeah, thanks again. And what was very striking for me actually was the huge support you received by the community and especially the kids involved. So fantastic pictures you could share with us. We all know how difficult it can be to find common ground among all the stakeholders involved and to get everyone on board when starting an urban development project. So what helps is to understand that when you look at the city-wide scope, that city is a complex of people and with different views of the people and dreams, but also opportunities and privileges. So hereby, as also Heike Litzinger mentioned in her opening remarks, it is our responsibility to reflect and incorporate all the views of those persons and especially of those marginalized. And that is not just people who are living in poverty and the ones who live in slums and informal areas, but especially people with disabilities who experience a multitude of challenges. So we, as GIZ, have long been working on reducing inequalities also in our partner countries together with our partners. And part of reducing inequalities is to understand, first of all, the manifold of the realities that shape people's everyday life. Going into dialogue, or as you also mentioned, Anna, co-creation, and we can also go in co-creation workshops with the community. That also allows us to understand the different demands that everyone has on urban design. So as it was shown perfectly now in your example, Anna, participation is the key. Once everyone's voice is heard, we can design cities that are for everyone and for all of us, and we create inclusive cities. And in the end, isn't that what we need to do to make our cities more resilient, more thriving, more livable? Urban projects should always aim to remove barriers of any kind, to enable all of those who live in a city to partake in urban life. The current global challenges certainly do not make our work any easier. So, of course, I have to mention pandemics such as COVID-19, wars as in Ukraine, Sudan, or the Middle East going on right now. Then, of course, climate change and the loss of biodiversity that are challenges, and they are challenging us with increasingly complex global problems. Problems that lead to more people being affected by conflict and disasters, poverty and disabilities, and problems that are felt even more acutely by the marginalized. We at GIZ are tasked to find solutions to these complex problems in our partner countries. And fortunately, we have local, we have national and international partners which support us with their expertise and networks. I also would like to give an example. We have a long-standing partnership with Cities Alliance. That is an alliance that focuses on sustainable urbanization, informality and inclusion, as well as reducing urban poverty and the rehabilitation of slums. So, and as it was already mentioned, we further closely work together with initiatives that support urban infrastructure projects. So Mrs. Litzinger also mentioned the C40 Cities Finance Facility. So within their project preparation, they work on mainstreaming aspects of inclusion and equity so that no one is left behind. And there is another project in Bangladesh. This is called Livable and Inclusive Cities for All, that creates urban living labs which serve as inclusive and gender-sensitive participatory platforms. Just recently, they announced a handful of material which certainly supports us all in our common goal on making urban development processes more inclusive. With the mentioned and many more projects implemented with our partners in various countries, GIZ plays an integral part in putting inclusive cities into practice. So this year, GIZ celebrates the Urban October for the 7th time in a row. Our Urban October is an opportunity to engage in exciting dialogues, in events with various experts, partners, dear colleagues and organizations worldwide. With our Urban October, we stay in touch with current challenges of sustainable urban development, with best practices and local solutions, and with our dear colleagues and partners. So our shared expertise, knowledge, and experiences are key when raising awareness and bringing the urgency and need for sustainable and inclusive cities to a wider audience. And similar to last year's events, we have yet again put together a fantastic program and diverse event calendar. And I invite you all to visit the City Transitions website and register for those events that you would like to follow. One of these events, for example, is the global Mixer on Data-Driven Urban Development with a gender lens. It will take place on October the 9th from 11 to 11:30 a.m. Central European Summertime. The session highlights how data can be leveraged into and create more inclusive and equitable urban environments with special attention to gender. So we are looking forward to seeing many of you at the discussions. And with that, I would like to warmly thank everyone who participated in today's session, and of course, many, many thanks go to all the people involved organizing all these exchanges and events, making this year's Urban October a reality. So, thank you for all your tremendous efforts and ongoing commitment. I very much look forward to the upcoming weeks, and I wish you all informative exchanges, fruitful discussions, and inspirational debates. And with this, I would like to close this wonderful opening session. I say goodbye for now and be happy to see you again in one of the other Urban October events. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, and thank everyone involved.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.